Hi everybody, we're the Ghoul Guides. I'm Lauren and this is Mary, and welcome to another episode of Archive Deep Dive. This week it is Mary's turn. Mary, what novel will you be dragging from the dusty archives of Gothic canon today for us?
So I have delved deep into my Gothic shelves and brought out Charles Maturin's 1820 Gothic novel Melmoth the Wanderer, which technically is quite well known. But I think it's one of those texts that a lot of Gothic scholars haven't actually read.
Full confession.
Yeah.
I have a copy of it on my bookshelf that I must have bought years ago. Don't think I've ever cracked the spine.
No, which is understandable, but also a shame because it is such an archetypal Gothic novel, and it's really interesting and fascinating, but it's just super long. It's like 4 volumes and
every time I've had a look
500
at it, I'm
pages.
Maybe next time.
It is a long read, but hopefully this will be a little taster into the Gothic world of Melmoth, and maybe some people will pick it up and read some of it.
I'm excited because every time I've heard you talk about it, I think I have to read this novel, and then I forget. So hit me with the Gothic goodness.
Okay, so let's get started. So for those of you who don't know, Charles Maturin is a 19th century Gothic author, but he was also an Irish clergyman, and he kind of wrote a lot of Gothic texts and also published some of his sermons. And he wrote them kind of like in parallel. So his sermons, I think you can read through a Gothic lens as well. And his Gothic novels are infused with that kind of religious and specifically anti-Catholic fervour that he preached in his sermons. This is one of the novels that is kind of ascribed to the Matthew Lewis horror kind of vein of Gothic literature. So it has the supernatural, it has quite a lot of visceral horror scenes in it. I think it's great and really interesting. But it is just super long.
So we're leaning away from the Radcliffean explained supernatural, away from the kind of suggestion of taboo, and straight into the meaty horror Gothic in its early stages.
And like I say, there's 4 volumes, but we're not going to look at it in volumes because I think it's actually so this is what's called a kind of nested layer narrative. So I think we're going to go through the different layers, which will hopefully make it easier to follow. That is the plan. We'll see how successful I get onto. But yeah, each layer has its own kind of visceral horror, supernatural episodes. Some different, some connected. It has a lot of doubling and parallels throughout the layers. We'll see how we get on.
I'm almost certainly going to get confused.
Yes, well,
let's see how long will it take Lauren to lose the plot, literally.
I will keep checking in on you and seeing if you are following what I am saying. Okay, so I guess we should, before we get to the actual text, let's talk about who's in the novel. So
let's meet the cast of characters.
The cast of characters. So again, disclaimer, there's a lot of characters in this novel. I'm not going to talk about all of them. So I'm just going to hit on some of what I think are the key ones, although I will definitely miss out some other key ones. And also a lot of them have the same names. So I will be using nicknames.
Love that about Gothic literature. Love that.
Yeah, so up first we have John Melmoth.
Okay.
Who is not the title Melmoth. He is his great something nephew. So like a distant relative who's also called John Melmoth. like the title Melmoth. So it's gonna get really confusing. So I think we're just gonna call him Johnny Boy.
Okay, cool. I'm down with that, Johnny Boy.
Yeah, Johnny Boy. So Johnny Boy is basically a student, a typical student. He's annoyed. He has to go back to his family home in Dublin because one of his other relatives is dying, and he's just annoyed that he has to be there. So yeah, that's Johnny Boy, relative of Melmoth the Wanderer. Next up, we have Stanton. So Stanton is an English traveller turned paranormal investigator.
Oh, okay.
So he encounters the title character Melmoth the Wanderer, and then essentially follows him around and tries to investigate him.
That's very Watchmen, like who wanders the Wanderer, like.
Yeah. Also ends up in a madhouse. So is he mad?
Okay.
Is he not? There's all those kinds of layers there about what he sees and his eventual kind of final encounters with Melmoth in the madhouse. But yeah, it's up to you, the reader, to decide whether you think he's actually mad or if he's just, fixed on following Melmoth the Wanderer around.
Okay.
So that's the second character. The next one that we have is Alonso Moncada.
Okay.
So Alonso Moncada is an escaped Spanish monk.
That's definitely an accurate Spanish name.
Yeah, exactly. So he ends up in Dublin on a shipwreck, but he's essentially escaped from the Inquisition. And obviously, in the madhouse, Melmoth the Wanderer encounters Stanton. In the prisons of the Inquisition, Alonso Moncada, that's where he meets Melmoth the Wanderer. And he ends up washed ashore in Dublin at the same time that Johnny Boy is there.
Okay.
So they end up in Ireland. The next characters we have are Solomon and his son. So Solomon is a crypto Jew.
Okay.
Living in Spain. His son doesn't know that he's Jewish.
Do you want to, crypto Jew is one of those terms. Do you want to give a little bit of...
Yeah. So his son doesn't know that he's Jewish, and basically because the Inquisition persecuted Jews, Muslims, anyone they deemed as being
literally
heretics. Everyone, even sometimes Protestants. So basically, crypto Jew is just a term that refers to Jewish people who were practicing their Jewish faith, still considering themselves Jews, but practicing it in secret. So on the outside, they would pretend to be Catholics. So they'd often have like a kind of Catholic name and then a secret Jewish name, and then they would practice their Jewish rituals and their Jewish faith in secret. Hence, crypto. It basically means secret. So you have these two Jewish characters who we meet, and then we also have Adonijah. So Adonijah is also living in Spain. He's not a crypto Jew because he's basically just living in a kind of subterranean tunnel underneath Madrid, and he is also Jewish.
Heard it's lovely down there.
Well, yeah, I mean, he lives there alone. He's not hiding his Jewish faith. He's just hiding himself. He lives there alone. He's quite old, but he is surrounded by 4 skeletons.
Okay.
So that's how he spends his days.
Cool.
Yeah,
I mean, that is how I would like to retire, into the catacombs beneath Madrid, surrounded by skeletal remains.
Yes. I mean, it just sounds like the dream, right? Where better to quarantine?
Yeah, like right now, maybe, actually, yeah.
The subterranean catacombs of Madrid surrounded by skeletons. Yeah. Okay, so those are the Jewish characters of the novel. Next, we have a woman, Emily. Emily, or also called Isadora. So she's basically an orphan who's raised following the death of her nurse on her own on this kind of paradisical island in the Indian Ocean, and she very much sees it as a paradise. And then eventually she is pulled out of her heaven by her family, taken back to Spain, which she hates, but she tries to live as the good Catholic daughter, but she doesn't really like it. And she's also the love interest of Melmoth the Wanderer.
Okay, so she's not really an orphan. Her family's alive the whole time.
Yeah.
She's living on an island on her own.
Uh-huh.
Somehow they find her, bring her back. And she's also the love interest.
Yeah. So when she's on the island, Melmoth visits every now and then, which we'll get to. Yeah, and then she basically spends all of her life wherever she is, pining after him.
Oh.
As you do with your first love.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
Yeah. I mean,
you do in Gothic fiction.
Yeah, this is a little bit twisted because it is a Gothic novel. But okay, so next we have just a little family, just a kind of I won't go into too much detail, but the Guzman family, who I won't go into all of their names, but that's basically a kind of story of poverty and temptation. So Melmoth kind of crops up in this story because when they're at their lowest, as he often does, he's like, yo, I'm here. So
it's me, you guys.
Madhouse, the Inquisition, and then family and poverty, and also an orphan living alone on an island. Melmoth crops up. And then next we have another woman, Eleanor. So Eleanor is English, a Protestant, and she's basically a jilted lover. So we'll kind of get to her story quite later on, but her story is very long and complicated, but she eventually ends up in like a really low place, and that's where Melmoth comes in.
I'm already noticing a repeating pattern here. This dude is kind of into people's suffering.
Yes, exactly. That's a massive theme of this novel, and which brings us to the final character that I will talk about, which is Melmoth himself. So he's basically into people's suffering, and he's kind of a tempter figure. So he finds all these people in these moments of despair, of suffering, of angst, anguish, and he crops up to tempt them.
Okay. So we've got some kind of like, I can see the sort of religious tones coming in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got a dude who turns up and is like, oh, having a bad time.
I love
an ill-advised choice.
What I love about Charles Maturin is that he's just not subtle at all in anything. Everything is just incredibly rich, whether it's the suffering, the descriptions of the suffering, the religious overtones and undertones, and then also the kind of Gothic and horror imagery. It's just all just this rich camp, in your face, you can't miss it imagery. Yeah, essentially.
So we're like, like the Radcliffean Gothic, for all that people take the mickey out of it, it's quite subtle. There's lots of allegory, there's lots of kind of unstated emotions. So what you're saying is this is like punch you in the face repeatedly, like
okay. Think Matthew Lewis, but think 500 pages of all of the worst horrific parts of the monk.
And there's some pretty horrific parts in the monk.
Yeah
That bleeding nun, y'all.
oh yeah, there's lots of that kind of stuff. Okay, so shall we dive in?
Let's deep dive. Let's do it.
Let's do a dive. Okay, so as I said, I'm not gonna go through this novel volume by volume, because I think it's better to kind of keep track of the narrative layers. So the novel starts with the main narrative layer. So this is layer 1, which is Johnny Boy's family drama.
Okay, so this is like the primary layer. This is like this is happening in real time layer.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a third person narrative, and it follows Johnny Boy as he comes from uni to his family home to see his dying uncle, and he's a bit miffed because he'd rather be at uni,
living it up, learning.
And obviously he gets home and his uncle's dying, but he also finds some like really weird other stuff. So one of the things is he comes across Stanton's narrative.
Okay.
So this is a second layer.
Okay, so this is our first meta-narrative.
Yeah. So you as the reader kind of experience as best as you can reading a text Stanton's narrative in the same way that Johnny Boy would.
Okay.
Beyond actually holding it. So it kind of describes Stanton encountering Melmoth and then following him and then his experiences in the madhouse. And when you get to the madhouse, there's a lot of kind of asterisks. But it's basically to signal breaks in the narrative. So if you had it as a kind of textual thing, it would be like ripped pages or missing parts or illegible stuff.
So it's adding to that physicality of the manuscript. So it's kind of playing into that Gothic metatext of this isn't a novel, this is like a document, a manuscript, a real diary. It's kind of giving that reader experience. Okay, cool. Love it when they do that.
I also love it. I think it's really fascinating, and I think it would be really interesting to look at this text through a kind of physical textual lens and actually hold them. But obviously Charles Maturin writing this, what bits does he choose to miss out is all the bits where Melmoth kind of talks to Stanton. So you're kind of like, well, what does he say? You kind of read that he's there in the madhouse with Stanton, but then you miss all these bits, and you know that they're horrific because Stanton says like, oh, I was shocked, and he has, horrified, but you don't actually read that part.
Okay. So this is kind of like the faint and the swoon in like the 18th century Gothic. Like the heroine faints before you get to find out what's behind the black veil. And in this, it's like, well, that page has been torn out.
Yeah.
You don't get to know. Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's like building suspense.
Yeah, exactly. And so you and Johnny Boy get to the end of this kind of textual layer. It goes back to the main narrative, and you're both kind of like, what was that? What did I just read?
Weird flex, but okay.
Exactly that. So he then continues to kind of like look around his family home, and he stumbles on a portrait that talks about that's basically a portrait of this Melmoth that he's just been reading about. But the portrait says that it was painted 150 years ago.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And also, spoiler for those of you who don't know, Charles Maturin is the great uncle of Oscar Wilde.
Interesting literary connection. Portraiture. Hello.
Exactly. So obviously Oscar Wilde's most famous novel, The Portrait of Dorian Gray. The portraits function differently in the novels. The point about the portrait in Melmoth is that the portrait looks exactly the same, as you will find out, as Melmoth does.
So whereas the picture of Dorian Gray is the secret, the portrait in Melmoth is more like the indication that the secret exists.
Yeah. So, and I guess in a way they both signal to the character's immortality, but in different ways. So basically, the picture in Melmoth is 150 years old, and Melmoth looks exactly the same. So obviously there's something weird going on.
Something's going on here. This guy's not aged.
Whereas the portrait in Dorian Gray, it ages and it corrupts and it's, horrible and it's just gross and grim. Obviously to show his kind of inward moral decay, but Dorian still stays the same, so that it's still signaling, again, something weird is going on here.
So we're still getting the same kind of use of art to signal a perversion of the natural course of life.
Exactly. Okay. Both Melmoth the Wanderer and Dorian Gray are unnaturally old and unnaturally alive. And also, just before we move on from this Dorian Gray thing, Oscar Wilde, when he was on the run for a bit, used the name Melmoth as a kind of pseudonym. So I just think that's an interesting parallel between the two. Yeah, little connection to the novels. Okay, so Johnny Boy sees this painting and he's even more confused, thinking, I've just read this random manuscript about this madman, and now I've seen this portrait, and he basically then has this really weird dream, or it's kind of not exactly sure if it's a dream, but he's visited by Melmoth the Wanderer, as if Melmoth has stepped out of the portrait or stepped out of the narrative and is having this encounter with him. But you're not really sure, is it a dream? Did it really happen? Whatever. Enter Alonso Moncada.
So this is our escaped Spanish
monk. So there's a storm, there's a shipwreck. It's kind of implied that Melmoth the Wanderer was in some way connected or involved with the shipwreck. One survivor of the shipwreck, who coincidentally happens to be Alonso Moncada. Johnny Boy is obviously like, wow, let's make sure that this person, let's get him help, let's get him better. So he's staying with Johnny Boy in this family house.
In the Melmoth home.
And then they both discover that, you're kind of here, you have a history with Melmoth the Wanderer.
We have a mutual friend.
Yeah, let's be Facebook friends. So he convinces Alonso Moncada to share his story. So then we enter the main kind of second narrative layer. So we and Johnny Boy are essentially now listening to the oral story of this escaped Spanish monk.
Okay, so this is meta-narrative number 2.
Number 2, yeah. So the Stanton narrative was quite self-contained, but this one will be quite long and quite detailed. And you will forget that you're in a narrative layer because it is so long. So
it's very Wuthering Heights, in which you're like reading and then it'll switch back to the narrator and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. So following his dramatic entrance, courtesy of the shipwreck, Alonso spends a very long time talking about his own family drama. I think maybe a little bit excessive. But basically, the TLDR, his parents were very young. They fell in love, and then his mother got pregnant, but they weren't married. So they have Alonso out of wedlock, and then they get married, and then they have another son. But they have this first son who was essentially illegitimate, born out of wedlock, and a priest convinces them, keep him in secret, don't acknowledge him publicly, that kind of thing. And then when he's old enough, he can come and become a monk. And that's the way that you, as the mother, can absolve your sin.
Great.
Yes. So basically, the two brothers eventually meet, and they get on really well. And Alonso's like, oh, okay, I've got a brother, cool. And his brother's like, cool, like let's be pals, y'all. And then his mother's like, oh yeah, you have to go to the monastery. If you don't, then
guess what? I promised you to
church.
And don't go, I'm damned to hell. So.
Exactly. And that becomes such a big kind of play in this part of the novel, where the mother guilts him so much with emotion and the threat that she will be eternally damned, and that's
a big thing to bear. Do I enjoy my life, or do I, if I believe this, damn my mother to eternal hell.
It's a big thing to have on your. It's a big thing to have on your shoulders. It's a big thing to have on your kind of conscience. So Alonso eventually realizes he can't do anything else. Everything's essentially been conspired against him. So he goes into the monastery, becomes a monk. But he tries to work out, is there a way that I can absolve myself of these ties? And he's always trying to get out. But no, can't get out. He's stuck there.
It's quite a rigid system.
Quite a rigid system. And then there's a whole description of him basically becoming like a mechanical monk, doing things well, but without actually, without possessing the kind of Catholic
so this
belief.
Is that anti-Catholicism coming in, this kind of criticism of the ritual as being something that's easy to do without actually having any spiritual connection or belief.
It's exactly that, yeah.
So this is definitely Maturin's bias kind of seeping in.
100%.
Quite blatantly.
Yeah. Alonso is never described as an atheist. He always has his kind of faith, but he doesn't subscribe to Catholicism, and definitely not the kind of rituals.
So this is kind of maybe going back to that trope of the honorary Protestant.
Yeah, exactly. So you as a reader are kind of like, oh, this is really unfair. He shouldn't be there. And his brother also thinks that this isn't fair. So his brother, and then with another monk in the monastery that he's at, do this scheme to kind of get him escaped. Because they can't do it legally, then they'll do it illegally. And this escape is also very long. It's part of the novel. We'll skip ahead a bit, and basically the monk has been working with the Inquisition, and he rats him out. And during the escape, he then, because he was trying to escape, he then gets taken to the prisons of the Inquisition.
Which is not a place anybody wants to be.
Not a place anybody wants to be, and his brother also dies. Not a great family story, but big chunk of his narrative. But yeah, he's in the prisons of the Inquisition, and it is there that he encounters Melmoth.
So Melmoth's just like chilling in the Inquisition prison.
Just
as one does.
You kind of get the impression that he hangs out in the prisons of the Inquisition a lot, trying to. We'll get to what he's trying to do later, but there's some kind of tempting going on.
I love the idea that the Inquisition guards are just like, I mean, you're in the prison, so yeah, whatever.
Well, I don't think they know what's going on. Because that's also another question. How's he getting in and out?
Yeah.
And it raises all these kinds of supernatural questions about Melmoth the Wanderer, into how is he travelling across the world, and how is he getting into these spaces without anybody else knowing?
The whole point of the Inquisition prison was supposed to be that it was extremely difficult to get in or out.
Not if you are a supernaturally old wanderer, apparently. Quite easy to do that. Anyway, the Inquisition decide that they're going to have an auto de fe, which is basically another big pomp ritual that the Inquisition did do historically, where they would burn a lot of people in their prisons. Bored with torturing you, don't want you in our prisons anymore, so we're gonna have a nice celebration and burn you all, essentially.
Burn some heretics.
Yeah, let's burn some heretics, except it's really bad. And during this procession, sort of procession, Alonso manages to escape, because that's all he wants. That's all he's ever wanted. Doesn't want to be a monk, doesn't want to be associated with the Roman Catholic Church, so he escapes, and he ends up in this house, and it just happens to be the house of Solomon. So if you remember the character list,
this is that crypto Jew.
Solomon is the crypto Jew, and it just coincidentally happens upon Solomon as he's in the middle of a circumcision ritual, and he's just about to reveal to his son, yo, I know you think we're
FYI.
Catholics, actually we're Jewish.
Seems like a really bad time, like being like, oh, there's an auto-da-fe going on. This is definitely the moment that I should reveal our Jewish heritage and perform this sacred ritual. Like, what an odd time to choose to do that very momentous thing that, if caught, would get you burned along with everybody else.
It's very odd. It's very odd. And obviously he's interrupted and there's all this confusion, and his son is like doubly confused because now they have this delirious escaped monk who is saying to them, you have to hide me or I'm going to reveal you to the Inquisition. And obviously if it's discovered that they are crypto Jews, they will get thrown in the prisons of the Inquisition. So that's not good for them. But Alonso's been in the Inquisition for a while, and he's a lot delirious. So, and Solomon is also now to his son trying to explain what all of this kind of Jewish items are, and trying to have this really emotional moment with his son, and also trying to protect them. And it's all just drama essentially. But he does hide him for a bit, and he's like, I know somewhere where you can go, and I'm gonna get you to safety. Just don't reveal who we are, please.
Just shut your damn mouth.
And Alonso Mercado does something really stupid. He looks out the window and someone recognizes him, which then
you meant to just be like, oh yeah, I'll just have oh shit.
And at first someone thinks he's a ghost because they think he's died, but no, the Inquisition rock up, and Solomon quickly opens like a kind of trapdoor and is like, go down this tunnel and just that will take you to where you need to go, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of hear, I guess you're kind of following Moncada's narrative. So he's hearing what's going on above, where the Inquisition turn up, arrest Solomon, and they say they're going to take him to the prisons of the Inquisition, and that they're going to throw his son in a convent, which is a bit odd, but that's basically where you leave Solomon and his son.
Look, when you're doing an anti-Catholic shtick, you don't need to get the details right. Like, it's all the same.
Exactly. So basically, Alonso's like, right, well, I guess I'm going down this secret subterranean tunnel. So he carries on, and then he ends up in this subterranean vault, where he sees this very old man. Has a bit of a kind of meltdown, but eventually it turns out that this is Adonijah. So Adonijah is the other Jewish character, who has been living in the subterranean tunnels of Madrid, and it's kind of implied that the Jewish community in Madrid have this kind of secret network where they communicate with each other safely, and evade the kind of reach of the Inquisition. And then at some point, Adonijah does say, "Don't worry about Brother Solomon. Like, he'll be fine. We'll sort him out. Don't worry." But basically, Adonijah has all of these manuscripts, and he wants someone to transcribe them. And Alonso can read these languages that they're written in, so he is the one who will transcribe them.
Lucky.
Yeah. So there are some weird parallels between Adonijah and Melmoth the Wanderer. Adonijah is also supernaturally old, and it's kind of implied that he also saw kind of like alchemy and black magic. He's like over 100, and it's kind of like, how are you alive? How are you here?
That's not normal.
And he has these manuscripts, and he has, as well as the kind of 4 skeletons, he's got all of these kinds of medical things, like jars filled with fetuses or animals or stuff. So it's a weird space.
So it's kind of like a weird cabinet of curiosities.
Yeah. Very, very yeah, very, very much that, and very much tied to kind of the mysteries of life. And you're kind of like, how are you alive, and where did you get your secret knowledge, and what is going on here? But basically, Adonijah starts to transcribe some of the manuscripts who you learn are connected to some of the skeletons. So 2 of the skeletons are Adonijah's wife and son.
I mean, till death do us part, taken very literally there. Like,
Yeah,
she's dead, but he's alive.
Yeah, and one of them is Emily. Emily is Adora.
Okay, so this is our not orphan living on her paradise island.
Yes, and that's the first tale that Adonijah that Moncada transcribes, and
right.
he describes this process as if something took over him and he just started writing and didn't stop until he'd transcribed it. And this then you enter a third narrative layer
within narrative number 2, though.
Yeah. So picture this: Moncada is telling his story to Johnny Boy, and then in this story, he's now telling you about this manuscript that he transcribed.
Right.
So it's we're reading this manuscript, and Moncada is also telling that to Johnny Boy in the kind of, so it's confusing, but that's basically what's going on. And
we're getting to the smaller dolls in the matryoshka.
Exactly. And this narrative layer is called the Tale of the Indian, and it's also written in a weird kind of third person narrative. And a lot of it is kind of talking about the island and talking about Emily on the island in this weird kind of almost lyrical prose. Emily is a castaway.
Right.
And it's kind of like a romance novel, or a romance part of the story, where it tells the meeting of Emily and Melmoth. So she's there on her own, and he rocks up and he talks to her and he tells her things. And he shows her things, and she basically falls in love, and he's the only person that she knows.
I mean, he's the only person that she knows. It's very not Stockholm syndrome, because Stockholm syndrome is kind of bullshit, but like, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
So again, but you said like Melmoth just kind of appears places. So she's on this like island, and he just kind of appears.
Yes, yeah, he appears, and she. So basically, there's all these rumors that start up in the kind of area about this island, and there's all these stories that think that there's a goddess living on this island, and sometimes people will kind of row across to the island and leave kind of offerings to this goddess.
Okay, so that's how she's surviving.
Yeah, and then eating the fruit. But Emily doesn't ever interact with any of these people, and Melmoth is the only one that she talks to. But then she's ripped out of her heaven by her family, so she's taken back to Spain, and they give her another name, or I guess like her real name, Isadora. So she's always kind of caught between these two identities: Emily, the castaway on a heavenly island, and then Isadora, who is the daughter of kind of Spanish merchants, nobility, that kind of thing, and trying to fit in. But she hates it. She's been ripped out of heaven by her friends. It's terrible. And her family want her to marry her father's friend, but she's like totally head over heels for Melmoth. And
how old is Melmoth meant to be? Like, obviously he's like 150 at least, but like, does it ever give you any, like, how old does he appear?
Oh, that's I probably should know this. I think, probably in his 30s at least. Probably not any. He's like he's an adult.
Yeah.
He's not an old man, but he's an adult. He's not a teenager, so I don't know.
Yeah. So there is a bit of a creepiness there anyway, that you've got like this young woman who's lived in isolation, and then this fully grown man who appears to be in his 30s but is actually of indeterminate age.
Yeah, and also at this point, I mean, I don't think it's ever kind of, and it's clear exactly when this happened, but he could have lived for 50 years already. So he's definitely older. He's definitely the older man, preying on a younger, naive girl, essentially. And he starts visiting her in Madrid, and she talks to him, but in secret, and everything's kept secret. And he basically just says, "Oh, just go along with what your family want. Isn't that what you want?" And it's just very secretive still. And she essentially says, no, I'm in love with you, and I would rather be with you. So he's like,
weird man who I know nothing about.
So he's like, oh, okay then. Well, I guess, would you like it if we marry? And she's like, yes. So he comes to her at night, as he is wont to do. And by this time, she still hasn't met her father. So she's at home, she's been rescued, she's living with her mother, the family priest, and all the kind of people in Madrid, but her father is off away on business and is yet to meet her, but he's been corresponding with the mother about marrying this other person. So Mum was like, okay, cool, well, forget about that, we'll get married if that's what you want. Picks her up in the dead of night, and he takes her to this faraway place, and they walk. And it's a long way away, and they're basically walking for hours. And she's like, where are we going? And they eventually get there, and it's kind of like a ruined kind of church, chapel or something. And they're married in the dead of night, in this kind of desolate, ruined place, by what turns out to be an undead hermit.
Undead.
Undead. Yes.
So there's like
undead.
a zombie hermit.
Zombie priest. Yep. They get married, and then as
she's just like, yeah, cool.
She goes along with it because she's like, oh, I want to marry this man, but she is terrified the entire time. She's tired. She's confused. She doesn't know where she's going. She's in this kind of ruined place. She doesn't like it. He leaves her for a long period of time, I guess,
this is raise human trafficking.
Well, yeah, he leaves her for this long period of time to essentially, I guess, raise the hermit from the dead, or whatever he's doing, or find his friend or whatever. Comes back, they get married. He places the zombie priest or whatever, puts his hand on their hands, and then she's like, I felt it was cold, and then she faints, and that's
poor hun. That is a wild ride.
Not exactly my ideal wedding.
Who the
hell is
telling this story?
Oh, well, that's a very good question.
If this is the third meta-narrative, and this is Moncado narrating him transcribing.
Yeah.
Who the heck did the dead hermit write his memoirs? Like, what?
Or maybe a donager.
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe he's done something with the skeletons, because remember as Alonso is transcribing, is almost like he's magically kind of possessed by something, and he's just transcribing this until he stops. So who knows? That is a very good question, though. Who is telling the story? And we don't think we find out. I don't think we know.
Cool.
But yeah, so that's basically, they get married, and then still in the Tale of the Indians, the narrative kind of shifts to another perspective, and we kind of meet her father. So he's on the road, and he's going home. So he's still yet to meet his daughter, and her father is called Don Aliaga. And his intention when he meets her is that then he'll introduce her to her future husband. But
she's just got married.
I think it goes a little bit back in time. So this kind of stuff happens just before they're about to get married. But you know, as a reader, that, well, she's not going to marry your guy. She's She's betrothed. She's got her heart set on this weirdo
for some unknown reason.
Yeah. So on the road, he meets this stranger at an inn, basically, who tells him a story. Can you guess where we're going?
So this is now meta narrative 4.
Yeah. So we are with Johnny Boy listening to Alonso tell his story, and Alonso is narrating his story, and then he starts talking about and revealing this manuscript. And within this manuscript, it then describes a meeting between Don Aliaga and a stranger who tells him a story.
Yeah. Okay.
If everyone is still keeping track. But this is basically the tale of the Guzmans. So
this is the down and out family.
Down and out family. So I think actually, you know, we don't need to necessarily, if you want to read about the Guzman family, read Melmoth the Wanderer. But I think all you need to know is that they are down and out. They're promised a lot of inheritance, and then the church kind of says no. The Catholic Church is like, no. So
it's another Catholic Church bad.
Anti-Catholic overtones are not subtle in this narrative layer at all. So they're promised all this inheritance, but they're trying to get it, fall back into poverty. And there's these stories of kind of prostitution that one of the daughter does. One of the sons starts selling his blood. So there's kind of all this vampirism tied to money and life and stuff like that. And then kind of overtones of cannibalism. At one point, obviously, who enters? Melmoth the Wanderer.
Who could it be?
To kind of tempt them, which we'll come back to what that tempting is later. There will be a massive spoiler, but you know. And yeah, so and then also like potential like insanity and stuff like that. So there's a lot that happens in this little
just
story.
A few things going on there then.
Yeah, but essentially everything works out, and the family end up getting the money anyway, and Melmoth does not succeed in his temptation.
Mm-hmm.
So Emily, Isadora's father, Don Aliaga, has fallen asleep while listening to the story in the Zen. Because he's
it's boring. It's about poor people.
yeah, I'm not interested in hearing about poor people. Oh, poor me. Don't care. What else? Yeah, because stories of poverty and murder. Not interested. When he wakes up in this inn, the stranger that he was talking to isn't there, but there's another stranger. And massive hint, massive spoiler, that stranger is Melmoth. So in between,
who's the first stranger?
Well, exactly, who is the first stranger? And you don't really know what happened to him, but I think it's very obvious that Melmoth has probably killed him or has done something with him. It's just kind of not really explained, but it's very suspicious as to why the first stranger is not there anymore.
Great.
Super suspicious. So yeah, Melmoth has, in between like wooing Emily Isadora and also whatever else he does as his day job, he's now here on the road in this inn with Don Aliaga, and he's like, guess what, dude? I knew the Guzmans. Yeah. Are you interested in stories like this? I can tell you more.
I mean, kind of funny. He fell asleep in the first story, so it's like, how will I get your attention? I'll tell you more.
I'll tell you more. And Don Aliaga is like, no, thank you, no thanks. I'm going back on the road tomorrow, so I don't think I'll have time for any more of your, stories or whatever. And also, kind of a bit confused about what happened to the other guy, but I'm also not really that bothered about that. Fine. So the second stranger, who is, Melmoth, is like, okay, cool, I will see you tomorrow, friend, and leaves. So then cut to tomorrow. Don Aliaga's on the road, traveling back to see his fam and his long lost daughter, who he's trying to set up with one of his mates.
Yeah. Guess
who rocks up? Melmoth the Wanderer.
This guy gets everywhere.
He does get everywhere. He's like, your friend, hey. You again. What a coinky dink.
It's almost like you had planned this.
Yeah. And he tells Don Aliaga another story.
So is it implied that when he keeps fucking off and leaving Emily on her own randomly, he's like popping up to like taunt her dad for undisclosed reasons?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely one of the things that he does. I mean, who knows what this person does with his time? You know, it's never really clear, and he doesn't spend all of his time with Emily and Isadora. But I mean, he's also, we have to assume, still seeing people in, you know, prisons of the Inquisition, and maybe visiting some madhouses, and maybe doing other stuff. But yeah. Not a one-trick pony is our Melmoth.
Gets around. He's well travelled.
Well, he is a wanderer. Okay, so this story is called The Lover's Tale. So this is another narrative layer. So like the Guzmans.
So we've gone back to narrative 3.
Yeah.
Narrative 4's over. We're starting narrative 5.
Yeah. Okay. See what I mean when I said the narrative layers are most important but also super confusing. So this one is set in England, and it focuses that. Yeah, we do, and it focuses on the Mortimer family.
Oh, okay. So I mean, anyone who is kind of familiar with medieval English history probably knows that Mortimer was like a big royal adjacent family, like had a lot to do with War of the Roses, Civil War. I think it goes right back to like William the Conqueror. They were like, hey, recognize our land. Like, no. Also in Nottingham we have Mortimer's Hall.
Oh, interesting.
A fun little tunnel that goes from the castle to the brewery.
That is interesting.
Just like to get that in there.
This is that Mortimer family.
Okay, so a reader in like the 1820s would be like, oh, it's those guys.
Yeah. And in this story, I'm not gonna lie, it starts off with a really long preamble basically describing that. And it is interesting, but it's also, at this point, you're like well into the novel. And you're like, oh my gosh, just no. I don't need any more details. You can't give me all this stuff. Just tell me about Melmoth.
My brain is full. Who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, so like you say, the Mortimer family, who I cannot help but read in that Knight's Tale accent. Roger! Lord Mortimer! So I apologise.
If you have not seen A Knight's Tale, it is the best film ever made, full of historical accuracy.
It's so accurate. It's almost like a documentary.
It's just the best film ever.
It's like Chaucer walked out of history and into this film.
It's got David Bowie on the soundtrack.
And Queen. Yeah.
Well, Heath Ledger's finest role, R.I.P.
Yes. So if this video doesn't convince you to read Melmoth the Wanderer, then please go and watch A Knight's Tale. Yeah. It's great.
Through Melmoth. Watch A Knight's Tale.
Watch A Knight's Tale. But yeah, so obviously you've got, the Mortimer family is tied to England's history, Civil War, Cromwell, the monarchy, Puritanism. So that's the big kind of religious theme in this narrative layer. And Lord Mortimer's granddaughter is called Eleanor. Her cousin is called Margaret, and they also have another cousin called John Sandal. So yes, another John. Like, find another name. You've got two John. You've got two John Melmoth. We don't now need another John Sandal. But anyway, we will just we'll just call him John Sandal for ease. Basically, Eleanor and John fall in love, but John's mother wants him to marry Margaret because there's a clause in their inheritance that he would get more money or something like that to do with all these inheritance lines. Okay. So on
classic, complicated, aristocratic bullshit.
Yeah, and the mother like completely gets her claws in and just ruins everything. So on Eleanor and John Sandal's wedding day, his mother tells him that actually I'm not your mother. Eleanor's mother is your mother. Your father had an affair. You're actually sisters. Your siblings.
Why would you wait? Like, the minute he's like, I'm going to propose to her, I mean, why would you be like, for maximum effect and trauma, I will wait to not only reveal to you that I am not your mother, which is pretty traumatizing in of itself, but the woman that you are in love with and have just invited everybody to wherever they are to get married is in fact your sister. You could have done like weeks leading up to a wedding.
She had weeks. She had months to come up with a non-incesty reason that they couldn't get married. But she couldn't, so yeah, she chooses the ultimate.
Or just, reveal the incest before it goes too far.
But there's no incest. Well, I mean, we're just going to skip over the cousin part, but there's no actual
well, yeah, like technically, by modern standards.
Yeah.
Maybe don't marry your cousin, because genetics is a thing.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point. Okay, so she lies to her son, causes him immense emotional and mental pain by telling him that she's not his mother and his fiancée is his sister.
Yes. So Eleanor's already at the church, and she basically sees him running off on horseback, so I guess galloping off, and then never doesn't hear from him for a while, and he offers no explanation because he's promised his mother that he won't share this bit of information. So she's like, she's basically jilted at the altar and given no explanation. So she then moves out of their home. She was living with her cousin Margaret, and she moves out of her home, and she kind of gets super into Puritanism for a bit. And then
I think like that's kind of like her eat, pray, love. I got super into Puritanism for a while.
Yeah. She's living with, I think, one of her aunts who's like a Puritan. And it's if you want all the details, read the book. There's too many. I can't spend too much time going into that, but you will find interesting Puritan stuff in this section of the narrative. Basically, John Sandal comes back. He's kind of assuaged his kind of disgust and everything, starts hanging out with Margaret, starts getting really friendly with Margaret.
Oh my god.
They fall in love.
Oh god, I feel like the lie was only a half lie.
They get married. Oh no, they are definitely cousins as well.
Oh,
no one is siblings here.
Oh, thank God.
They it's not that kind of novel.
I mean, poor Eleanor, but like okay, cool. Because that is not unheard of in Gothic novels.
No, well, they also like, well, we want you to be okay with this. So they're like, please come and let's be friends again. So Eleanor's like, okay, but obviously, like, it breaks my heart every time I see you both together, because she's still madly in love with John. It kills me inside. They get married.
And she still doesn't know why he left her.
No, they get married, and then Margaret gets pregnant, and then she basically dies in childbirth. And the children die as well, and then John Sandal is just beside himself because it's very traumatic event. And then his mother's like just overcome with guilt and confesses to a priest who is like, oh no, this is awkward and bad, and someone is dead. And also now John Sandal is he basically goes a bit insane.
Well, he's just been widowed and lost his children, and what then is told the truth about I don't
think he's told the truth, but Eleanor is told the truth. But she's like, well, can't marry this guy now. he's not 100% there. That wouldn't be fair to him. But she nurses him, and this is where Melmoth kind of comes into the novel. But as well as while he's there, there's also another priest. So he's like the friendly neighborhood priest. This is one of my favorite bits of the novel.
Friendly neighborhood priest.
Yeah, friendly neighborhood priest who's there. Obviously, watching Eleanor while she takes care of of her insane former lover, who I would still be mad. I don't know about madly in love, but I would still be like very, very angry that you left me on my wedding day.
Like, at least just tell me. Damn.
So basically, to go back to the kind of narrative layer before, Melmoth is talking to Don Aliaga about this story, and this is one of my favorite bits in the novel. It's just so, I think it's so funny. So I'm just going to read this passage. So he says, "It was at this period," said the stranger to Aliaga, "I first became acquainted with, at this time, a stranger who had taken up his abode near the hamlet where Eleanor resided, was seen to watch the two figures as they passed slowly on their retired walk." So he's basically talking about another stranger who is watching Eleanor and John Sandor, and Melmoth is like, "This is the time when I saw these people. Oh wait, I don't mean these people. I mean this is the time that another person who wasn't me saw these people." Just,
oh my gosh.
So he's basically, if Don Aliaga was smart and paying attention, he would be
like, wait, this happened X amount of years ago in England.
How old are you? And also, you were telling me this like you're here, and I thought this was a story about the Tempter from the Guzman story, which you also said that you knew the Guzmans. So if you're telling me that you were here with Eleanor and John Sandor, does that mean you're also that person? But
Don Aliaga is just like, yeah, good
and
story.
Aliaga is so stupid, and just doesn't care about people that aren't him and won't make him more money. So he just completely doesn't miss that. But it's in the text. You will find it when you read it, and I just think it's hilarious. Because I think as well, it's like, is Melmoth, was that a slip up by Melmoth, or did he do that on purpose? Because I think he's trying to give Don Aliaga like a lot of clues and things. Yeah. So I think maybe that was just a well constructed, orchestrated little kind of piece of evidence that anyone that isn't Don Aliaga would have picked up on.
Yeah, or maybe it's like, if you're smart enough to figure it out, then I'm not gonna fuck you over, but if you're not, then screw you, buddy. I'm gonna get a zombie to marry me to your daughter.
Exactly. And we already know that Melmoth and Isadora Emily will get married, but at this point it's kind of gone back a little bit in time, so this is before the wedding with the zombie priest. So in this story, when Melmoth corrects himself, the stranger, who is definitely Melmoth, is recognized by the friendly neighborhood priest, who then reveals to Eleanor that he actually knew him years ago, and his name is Melmoth, and that he had been really into alchemy.
Oh, that's that alchemy dude.
yeah, he's like, oh, this is my old friend who got into alchemy. We kind of got a bit estranged, but then he called me back when he was dying and basically asked me to confirm that when he was dead. And I saw him die. I saw he was dead, and I confirmed that he was dead. But this was years ago, but that's definitely him right there. So I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so maybe Melmoth's also a zombie. Kind of.
Well, he's definitely supernaturally alive. You don't know how, but here you get the kind of implications that maybe it's alchemy. Maybe
so he's either faked his death.
Yeah.
Or he's like risen from the dead.
Yeah, exactly. So he leaves that story there, and we go back to Aliaga and Melmoth. And Aliaga, as you would expect, is just basically like, who is this creepy weirdo? Please go away. Just want to get rid of you.
To be, daughters to marry off.
Yeah, exactly. And the stranger starts to tell him another story, but this isn't another narrative layer. And it's very kind of I think it's funny when you read it. But basically he's like, this one is different. This one is about a daughter who is in danger, and who is being tempted, and whose soul is under the threat of a mysterious tempter and wanderer. So it's basically a story that's actually not a story. It's a kind of very much implied threat, being like, dude, your daughter's in danger, and there's this stranger who I'm pretty sure both of us know I'm talking about myself here, and her soul is
always bad when people talk about themselves in the second or third person. Like, always a worry.
Yeah. So now Aliaga is like, oh shit, okay, I think he's talking about me and my daughter. I think I should hurry back home and check that, you know, my fam's all right and that no one's dead or sold their soul or whatever. So he then does what any normal person in a horror story does, is that once he's got over that kind of initial shock and horror, he convinces himself that it's not real.
He's like, that was probably nothing. It's fine.
Probably just some drama from a weirdo who's inserting himself into my life, and I just want to get rid of him and get out.
To be fair, by this point, I would be like, shut up.
I'm so tired. All your random ass stories.
I don't want to hear this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go home and some dude just stops me on the road and forces me to listen to 3 different narratives.
Yeah, so he's like, yeah, well, my daughter's getting married and I've got a wedding to plan.
Traveling on a train, so you know, I feel the pain.
Having to listen to a story that you didn't want to listen to and trying to extricate yourself from that situation is tough. And I say this as someone who doesn't want to be rude, but I'm also from the South, where we don't really talk to each other, and especially on public transport. So moving to the North was an experience. Everyone's super friendly though, and it's nice. Not bashing the North. It's nice.
Yeah. I'm technically from the Midlands, but all the Southerners think I'm Northern, so I've just embraced it.
Yeah. But yeah, so he gets home eventually, but he doesn't rush because he's got no reason to.
Time.
He is taking his sweet time. Yeah. So he gets back, and at this point, Emily is married and also pregnant. Oh, yeah, drums. But no one knows. But she's finding all of the wedding stuff like super orcs, and also like, trying to hide the fact that she's already married while everyone is trying to arrange a wedding, but also trying to hide the fact that she's secretly pregnant, while also hating every minute of being there and just wanting to be back on her island. So she's having a terrible time, and then they're having like a dinner, and Melmoth shows up to all of her family there. The person who she's meant to marry is there, her brothers are there, everyone's there, priests are there. Melmoth shows up, and Aliaga's like, yo, I know you.
You're that dude from the road.
And also then realizes, oh, I get what you were trying to do, and also, does that mean that you've already done it now? And then everyone realizes what Emily and Melmoth have done, so cat's out the bag, essentially.
The deed has been done.
And there's a fight, a lot of people die, Melmoth manages to go, and then the Inquisition show up and take Emily to the prisons of the Inquisition.
Why?
Because there's this supernatural person.
Oh yeah, no, that tracks.
There's a supernatural person.
She's potentially pregnant with some kind of demon baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, that makes sense.
This is essentially a kind of proto Rosemary's Baby.
I was just going to say, this is very Rosemary's Baby.
Except she does consent to some extent, although she doesn't exactly understand what she's consenting to.
Yeah, it's hard to consent when you don't know the full reality of what you're consenting to.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor one.
But there is this whole bit that I think is just super interesting when you consider it, the fact that this immortal being has managed to have a child.
Yeah, that's concerning.
So she's in the Inquisition, and then the scene kind of goes to the Inquisition. They try and take the baby from her, but the baby's already dead, and it has been alive, but it's now dead.
Oh, okay.
And it's left ambiguous as to whether the baby died because that's what demon babies will do, or if maybe
that they are not able, that they are not, able to sustain life.
Yes, exactly. Or the other option is that maybe Emily killed the baby because
the baby's going to get taken by the Inquisition.
Ever since she's been ripped from her island, everything has been terrible. And if people want to take her baby, what's going to happen to her baby?
Yeah. That's super dark.
And then it ends, basically the section of the narrative ends, and she's remembering her island, paradise, and she thinks of heaven. And she asks, basically, to this Inquisitor, will he be there? He being Melmoth. Because to her, paradise and heaven, the island, part of the reason why it was paradise to her was because Melmoth was there, and she is just so totally still into him.
I don't like that.
No,
I don't like it.
But she's worried about, and I think it raises a lot of questions about souls and afterlife, which are a big thing in this novel. And again, we're getting close to it, but we'll come to what the temptation thing is, and what's going on. But that is basically the end of the Tale of the Indians. So we go back to the main narrative.
Okay.
So this is Johnny Boy
talking to Johnny Boy.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. And Alonso takes a break.
Only natural after that storytelling.
And he tells Johnny Boy that basically, I have a lot more stuff to tell you. And I can tell you all about Adonijah and his crypt of skeletons. But, so at this point, I'm reading this and I'm like, I as a reader do want to get the DL on that crypt and Adonijah, but also this has been very long. I don't know that I want any more.
Please.
So you're kind of like, yeah, that does sound interesting, and I do, that you've raised all these questions, and I'm still confused about a lot of all these narratives, and they were excessively long. Did not need all that detail. Are you going to tell me them now? Whatever. But
just write a spin-off.
Yeah, maybe just do Melmoth Part 2. But anyway, they're basically interrupted by, can you guess who?
Is it Jesus?
That would be very unexpected.
It's his terrible immortal double, Melmoth the Wanderer.
It's Melmoth the Wanderer, yeah. Melmoth the Wanderer interrupts them and is like, oh, I know you've been talking about me. Here I am.
I heard you chatting shit.
Heard you chatting shit, and I'm here to set the record straight.
Talk about me to my face.
But basically Melmoth is like, I failed to tempt anyone and my time is up.
I'm actually really shit at my job.
I'm really bad at my job. Can you just leave me for a bit? I just came home because I wanted to be where I consider home, my family home, but can you just give me some space?
I need some time to reflect on my failures.
Yeah, so they kind of leave him alone because they're also like, what's going on? This is unexpected. And Melmoth has a little nap.
He's a tired boy.
Tired boy. Been wandering around for 150 years.
Oh my god, that's such an anticlimax. That this like supernatural being who's committed all these atrocities turns up and is like, I just need a nap.
Give me space, let me sleep. But he has a dream. He has a dream, and the narrative tells you a bit of his dream, and it's very weird, and it's got all these clocks and things, and basically all these stuff about his own damnation. So like, yeah, he's worried about himself being damned, because that is what the whole point of all of these temptings has been. So it's kind of like a Faustian thing, but also maybe alchemy tied to that. It's not really explained, but
hysterical that in attempting to not be damned, he's done a bunch of awful things to people.
Well, I mean, he hasn't necessarily done all the awful things. He just turns up.
He like gaslit some poor girl into marrying him.
That is the only.
Her up.
That's the only thing where he's done things. But every other thing,
he just tries to take advantage.
He just tries to take advantage of people when they're at the lowest. And everyone else says, and it's basically the bits missing from Stanton's narrative, and the kind of the big thing about his kind of day job essentially is that he's trying to tempt people to trade places with him so that they will be damned and he can just be normal again. Which if I've either made a deal with the devil, or if I've like done some alchemical experiment, like if I had to spend like 100 years just wasting my time trying to convince people, that doesn't sound very fun.
No, like at least with Faust, like it's interesting because the Faustian narrative is like, I'm gonna fuck with the Pope, I'm gonna ride on a dragon, I'm gonna do all of these things, I'm gonna learn knowledge. Like the whole point at the end is he's still unfulfilled. Like, but you know, the middle part of Faust is him doing all of this stuff with his immortality, not just roaming around like, do you want my, it's not very good temptation, do you want my immortality? All I've done for the last 150 years is roam around miserable.
And I think that's why the bits with Emily Isadora are interesting, because I think there is a kind of sense that he maybe does enjoy talking to her, and maybe at first his intention was to tempt her, but actually maybe a part of him does love her, and it is 100% creepy and predatory and weird.
Yeah.
But I think it is the only part in the narrative where it does kind of, in a weird way, like humanize him. And he goes about it in a weird way, and it's creepy and the whole like zombie thing. But what is his intentions with her? And then there's the baby. Like, what is he trying to maybe see if the baby will inherit the curse, or was that genuinely a love child? You don't really know. And I think that's why this novel is interesting, because it leaves all these questions.
Very ambiguous.
But you get to the end. And he's dreaming about his own damnation. And then Johnny Boy and Alonso Moncada are keeping the distance. And they hear all these weird noises from the room that they've left him in. So they go and check on him, peep around the door, and he's not there. He's gone. So like, oh, okay. Where's he gone?
I mean, he is a wanderer.
He is a wanderer. So he's wandered off. And they basically follow some tracks to this cliff. And they find this handkerchief. And that's what he was wearing. And it's kind of implied
just
a handkerchief. So it's kind of implied that something's happened in that room, and then he's maybe been dragged to this cliff or something.
That's
and then
very Faustian.
Maybe he's been dropped to the bottom of the cliff, or maybe he's been taken to hell. Who knows? But that's all that's left, and that is the end. That's the end of Melmoth the Wanderer.
Sorry.
Or is it? Dun dun dun.
That's the end of the novel.
That's the end of the novel.
So you don't even find out how he became.
Nope. That's it.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Wow.
And like I say, all that stuff, like the stuff that Moncada hints at, where he's like, I've not told you everything, and you know that there's 4 skeletons in that crypt, and you're like, I do want to know, but you don't know. You never find out.
So like, how the hell did the madman did the diary from the asylum get in the Melmoth house in the first place? Why?
He visited the home, basically searching for.
What does Johnny Boy have to do with any of this apart from being the focal point? Like, this poor kid comes home from university and is just like
find all this stuff. Got this portrait.
How depressing that you're not even the main character anymore.
Well, he's a witness.
Yeah.
He's John.
It's just so weird. It's just so weird though. Like,
yeah.
I can't believe that's how it ends. Wow.
What a ride.
Because like usually in alchemy narratives and like these like Methuselah type narratives, you have this whole section where like 3/4 of the way through they're like, let me reveal to you how I became cursed. Mama's just like, nah. I could tell you, but I need a nap. And now I've probably been dragged to hell.
I am tired.
That's a poor cool internet humor for you there, people. And then take it. Wow. And also, like, if I was Moncada or Johnny Boy, and he was like, I'll tell you later, I need a nap, I'd be like, no. You tell me now.
Well, he doesn't.
Old man.
He doesn't say that he'll tell them anything. It's Moncada who says to Johnny Boy, "I'll tell you the rest of my story." Yeah,
so he just turns up and is like, "Don't give me some space. I need a nap."
I mean, you know, if you've spent 150 years being an absolute failure, like, I don't know, and then you're looking forward to an eternity in hell, maybe a nap.
Why would you go back? Like, was it his family home? Is he one of the Melmoths who lived in that home? Like,
yes. Yeah. So like, I missed out a big bit about the Melmoth history.
Oh, but basically, so you do learn about them.
You do learn about them. Do I spoil that now? No, I'm not going to spoil that now.
Leave it for the reader.
Find out how the Melmoths come to Ireland. But yeah.
See, I think that, like, I feel like I do now need to read it because I'm getting the impression that a lot of my unanswered questions are because there's other shit in the novel that you haven't had time to go through.
Yeah, there's so much, and I have missed out a lot of detail, and I've simplified some things. But the thing that is not answered, and I think the question that you have, which is a good question, is how and why, and that I think is purposefully not answered. Because it is that kind of vague, but also eternal question that we all have as humans as to what is life and how, existential dread, exactly. And then that fear of the afterlife, tied to a fear of death. And if you postpone that death, do you postpone eternal damnation? Or
you
what?
Just prolonging the inevitable.
Yeah, which is why I think it's interesting to read this novel alongside some of his theological publications, where he does kind of tangle with his thoughts about death and the afterlife from his theological perspective. Although, do take them with a grain of salt, because like this novel, his sermons are also laced with a lot of anti-Catholic,
violent anti-Catholicism.
Yes.
Wow. So, a deep dive.
A deep
real deep dive. That, I mean, it's kind of like, instead, you know, I could do this Gothic trope, or I could do this Gothic trope, or I could do all of them in one novel. And guess what I have?
Yeah. Everything.
All of it.
So
really, it's the perfect novel to recommend to people, because whatever your Gothic preference, it's probably in this novel.
Yeah, and you can just find a narrative layer and just focus on that.
Yeah, don't even know. You to
read
the whole thing. I mean, it's bang for your buck. You know, you buy one novel, you get 5 narrative layers. That is value for money.
It is value for money. It is value for money. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting and really great about kind of early Gothic novels. They are so long, and yeah, they are really complicated, but you do get a lot of bang for your buck.
You do. So you do. If this was, you know, the circulating library of, you know, the late 18th, early 19th century, you would be like, yes, I was right to use my 3-volume limit on this novel. Though if this was 4, I'd be so peed off. Like, imagine being like, oh, I can only take the first 3, and then you go and someone else has got the 4th one. Or like, you can only then take the first 2 volumes out of another novel. I'd be so pissed.
Yeah. It is. I don't think it needs to necessarily be as long as it is. And there are some bits where you're like, really? Does it need to be necessary? But as a self-contained narrative, if you are looking at the narrative layers, then yeah, that detail is really important and really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you found this interesting, let us know. And if you haven't read Melmoth and this inspires you to read Melmoth the Wanderer, then also please let us know, because I think there's a lot of Gothicists out there who haven't read Melmoth. So maybe this will encourage and inspire some more people to read this weird ass novel.
Yeah, so obviously there is the comments below. You can also find us on Twitter at the Ghoul Guides. I'm Lauren, this is Mary, and this has been Archive Deep Dive. In the meantime, stay safe and stay spooky, y'all.